maybe overtake it, because eventually people could work from home if the collaboration tools and the communication tools were effective, more effective than they are now. It could actually replace the physical thing. But specifically the aspects of forming teams and maintaining teams over these video conference type of connections.
Yeah, so I can comment on that. So we, at Box, we make our core product is to help people collaborate wherever they are, right? On any device, across platforms, wherever they are. I think that, and that's super important, and that's got to be true going forward as the world is bigger and smaller at the same time. The one thing I always think about in terms of the virtual space is the human animal has not developed nearly as fast as the technology around us. Right? And so I firmly believe people still build trust in person. I think you can leverage the hell out of it later over technology, but you build it in person. And maybe that's what you believe, which you still bring people together at times, right? That part is still really important. So I think it needs to be a hybrid where you create relationship, you see each other in the eye, and then you leverage those relationships over technology that lets you do all kinds of amazing things that you couldn't do before, wherever you want to. So I don't think it's ever going to be either or. I think it's always going to be a hybrid. But that's just my opinion, but it feels right to me that we're just still people at the end of the day.
Yeah, but the most effective teleconference system right now is Cisco's system. I mean, it's very expensive and everything. But they had a real issue about being able to build teams. They couldn't do it. People wouldn't bond. They could use the system to maintain those bonds later on, but they couldn't form them. So
we fly everybody to headquarters for orientation for the first week.
We did the same.
Because that being in the headquarters, meeting people, and then the phone calls you have after I've experienced it are so much better than the ones you have when you've never met somebody before. Sorry.
So I agree with you. But I would also say that you can build teams that way. They just have to be on equal footing, right? So the reason why it works for your executive team is they're all that way. But if you had half of them somewhere, where even if you're doing a teleconference and 3 of them are sitting in a room, they've walked into the room together, they've had time to chat, they've maybe agreed on something, they could form a little coalition. It's either all or nothing where it works best, in my opinion. And if you do a hybrid, that works as well, as long as you have the right communication tools to make that work. But when people are on equal footing, they are forced to consider the other person's viewpoint and consider what they're not getting and build that into the system, whatever that is. If it's all collaboration remotely or not.
I think all of our senses are at play when we're interacting with each other. And even the best Cisco system is dealing with 2 of them, 2 senses. And it's a great tool, and we're seeing our clients use it more and more as the tool does get better, and I'm sure that will happen. But we're still a long way from the kind of going beyond just the communication of information to the communication of meaning and making communication and collaboration meaningful, how it connects with your memory and how it shapes your future decisions has to do with those human things you're talking about, I think.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's pluses and minuses to that, though. Like, all your senses are in play when you're interacting with somebody in person, which can be good or can be bad, right? I mean, if you're trying to come up with it, especially if things get heated or if there's emotions involved, like maybe it's good, maybe it's because it's a great idea, or people are getting excited, or maybe it's because they're calling you names or something, or there's a power dynamic in the room that may not exist if you're doing it over text. Like, that's the whole thing with emoticons and LOL and stuff, is trying to, if you take emotion out of communication and you're dealing with sort of this more rational format, it's sometimes better and sometimes worse depending on what it is that you're trying to accomplish. So I think it's about, like, we use almost entirely chat. Almost everything is in chat because there's a record of it. You can go back and reference stuff from years ago, and you can have a conversation and know that nobody's missing out on it, because even if they're not online, they can come back and read the backlog. Video, it's very difficult to do that. Even if you recorded it, just going back and nobody goes back and looks through. It's hard to search. It's difficult, right? So that's why we tend to try to have this bifurcation where when we're trying to solve something that other people may need to reference, that we prefer to do it in text, right? If it's at all possible, and not email, because that disappears. New people can't come on and see old email conversations. Like, it needs ideas of the stuff that should be ephemeral, that you know, a lot of times that's better in person. So how do you get people in person? Video is, we've found very little use for it over the 5 years that we've been doing this. I mean, we keep trying it and we keep sort of failing because A, all the tools are totally horrible, and B, because it's not good at either of these things, right?
Yeah, I think the evidence is, I mean, there's been a pretty big push by Cisco and many others to really sell this stuff. And the tools got a lot better than they used to be. You know, there's voice and video synchronized, and so it's definitely usable. But it isn't really growing very fast for whatever reason. So, you know, it just makes me wonder.
One thing that we found is, although everybody uses the same tools, and we use everything from Skype to Google Hangout to chat, everything is in play. There are some people who are just better at being present when they're not. And so what we started doing, and we do the same thing, we allow people to move if they want, but the condition is that you have to be present. You have to communicate presence, and you have to be present. So we started having people who are good at it, actually training other people. And sometimes they don't even know what is it that they're doing, but they have a good sense of when to check in and when to use what tool. It's almost like it's an area actually that's good for research.
I noticed there seems to be a consensus between you that different structures attract different people. Yeah, like Evan and Scott mentioned different structures, and you might attract different people. We tried actually to reduce structure and have it more open, so physical and from an organizational standpoint. And we realized that the gender kind of roles changed. Like the role of the female employees in our company was much more leading in an open space environment than in a structured environment that has more hierarchies. So I was wondering if that affects, for example, like what you do at GitHub.
Maybe. I mean, I wish I had more data to back that up. About a quarter of GitHub is female. It's fairly, because we're so heavily tech, I mean, we have a lot of engineers. There's probably 70% of the company's engineer design. It's been heavily engineered, so it's been really difficult to recruit females in the engineering space. We've been trying really, we do passion projects every couple of weeks. We have, you know, prominent women in engineering and in tech come in and give talks. We've hired, we've gotten a lot better at it, but since we have basically no meetings, which I think is like a lot of like the problem. I mean, it can be gender, or it can also be just, you know, your boss, right, or the sort of most like the biggest personality in the room or something like that can take the conversation in the wrong direction, and so we have less of all of that because it's just nobody cares, right? You're in a chat room, so it's a lot more sort of equal in that manner. But you know, I'm probably the worst person to speak to that as a guy, I guess.
But you seem to have an attractive model. Like,
yeah, I mean, I don't think that I think that we're a good place for women to work. I mean, as far as tech companies go, I think that we are, you know, the setup that we have is great for that. But we try not to be too super conscious about it, I guess.
I'm interested in kind of what you attribute that to. So is there a hierarchy that's implied by physical space that you've broken down? I mean, at Box, we have, of course, nobody in the company has an office, right? And that lack of hierarchy is really important. I mean, nobody, right? When I was at Google, we said nobody really had an office, but some people did, right? So that sends a different message. At Box, nobody has an office. And then a different approach of being able to approach anybody and not being able to tell, looking across an office, who's who and who's important and who's not. There's really no distinction. I think it's some of that as well, but I'd be fascinated to hear kind of how you attribute what you're seeing to the physical space.
what we saw is like these open space workshops where we invited every employee, plus external people, customers, friends, partners, journalists, students, that basically if you are able to propose your own topics and you can leave the topic when you don't like it or the conversation you don't like there, then at the end we found that the the topics proposed by women and led by women were much more powerful than on average in the company, the impulses. We had the same problem. We had like basically a tech company with 30% female staff and not in the development part. So, and we realized that when you open up, you kind of like get rid of some underlying hidden power structure.
Well, this is a fascinating conversation.